All right, guys, how you doing? This is the Patreon version of something we recorded last night, and I'm sending you the link. It's gonna be live on YouTube for a few days. Probably won't get a lot of hits because I'm not going to promote it, except I'm giving you the link. So if you've got the link, I want you to listen to it. You're probably mentioned in the episode, or I find it you're part of my childhood, and you might find it interesting. Lance, my buddy here, he does the record store with stspod.club. It is he's huge into music and started this podcast a couple of years ago on a wrestling feed, and we nothing to do with wrestling. Is what we call it. And he reviews an album where he picks an album from his huge collection just by random. So what we did was we gathered up uh, our top 10 albums, and we also talk about honorable mentions, but we talk about why, some fun facts about those albums. And I thought that's you, yeah, would enjoy it. Guys, if you want to join our Patreon, we do stuff like this every month. Only $5. Remember, only $5. The Patreon address will be in the description of this video. Enjoy and let me know what you thought of it.
All right, TRS Nation, this is a very special episode of the Record Store. As you can see, if you're watching us, you can see my partner in crime over there, BT. Brian Tremelli, I think is what we call him in
That
the
is
business.
Tremelli, yeah.
That is the insider term. So this is a very special episode. It is a TRS CKC crossover. This is almost like when Marvel took on DC, or Muhammad Ali versus Spider-Man, or those great comics when we were kids. So this is the 51st. It's a milestone, 51st episode of TRS. So very proud of that. Thank you guys so much for listening. The 147th. I know you always talk about how you can't believe it, but 147th episode of Cool Kids Countdown. So this, of course, we were brought in by the Ramen Cashews. That was our opening house band.
I love that band. Yeah, I told you this. I hate to interrupt you, but I did tell you. I seen them at the New Daisy in Memphis, and I believe it was 92 or 93. Just freaking awesome.
Feel free to interrupt. If you're crowing about the Ramen Cashews, you can always interrupt me on that. And in fact, I was going to say, I got into the Ramen Cashews because of Memphis in May. I remember hearing them on a couple of episodes last year on Memphis in May. So you're right. It was a great band.
Awesome,
so great find by you. So thanks to them for our opening music. So for a very special episode, we should have done it at number 50, but whatever. Numbers didn't work out. We compiled our top 10 albums of all time. And so I knew going into this, this wasn't going to be like a regular CKC where we have, 5, 6 maybe that cross over. I didn't think we'd have any. And sure enough, we didn't have any. So we had 10. We each came up with 10, and we have some honorables. A couple of ours appear on the others' honorables. But as far as our 1 through 10, nothing. So there's no correct way to come up with your top 10 list. There's no incorrect way. So I wanted to hear how you created yours. Give me yours first.
All right, here's what I did. Well, I just and I had forgot one, which was kind of funny when you sent your honorable mentions. I was like, oh my God. And then I texted you and I said that was really hard to do. Yeah. I started writing down songs first, and just the songs that I grew up to with, and then I started to remember the albums, the ones that I listened, and this is the ones I did that I listened to over and over and over. And this is kind of if I was going to pick 10 albums and I was going to buy a record player, this would be my 10 albums that I picked that I could have as albums and listen to all the time. They each have and I got something at halftime I want to talk about, but they each have a little something reason why, and we'll tell a fun fact about the album. Why did we pick it, and a favorite song too on every one of these? But there's after going through all of them, I think the best thing you can say is the reason I picked these 10 is because I listen to them the most. And when you get down to, and you'll probably say this too, when you get down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it's not like 5's better than 1 and vice versa. It's just like I had to put them in position. So I think the 10, and some of the honorable mentions is there. And we'll do that on the Patreon. But it was just like, the 5 we do before commercial break was kind of harder than it was the top 5, even though I'd forgot one. So
yeah, I mean, you can say it's interchangeable. I know, like we've done this on CKC where your top 2, 3, maybe 4 are interchangeable. Like they're all that evenly bunched at the top.
Right.
So I took a different approach because hard to put together this list because I have thousands of albums and there's so many things that I like. So what I did was I picked literally my top 10 bands of all time, bands or performers of all time, and then picked my favorite album from each of them and just literally ranked them in order from my favorite band, second favorite band, and so on. So again, there's no right or wrong way to do this, but for me, that made it easier. Like I know who my favorite band is, so
it might have been easier if I would have done it that way. But like I said, it's crazy.
There's no wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
But my list is definitely fluid. Like if you ask me my favorite album by a certain band tomorrow, it's going to be a different album in some cases because it just the day I made the list, those were the 10 albums that made the list. So anyway, picking very difficult, and again, interesting that we didn't have any overlap between our top 10. So what we did was we've got 10A and 10B. You're going to be the A's on each one, so you're going to go first. I'm going to be the B's. So we're going to get started.
We're going to do this a little bit different than the Cool Kids Countdowns we usually do. We're both going to have a 10. We're both going to have a 9, 8, and so forth. And we stole this from I stole this from a format of a music podcast. I want you to give them a shout out. What was the name of that podcast?
Oh, it was Playlist Wars.
Playlist Wars. There you go. Yeah. Shout out to Playlist Wars. That's where we stole this from.
They haven't done an episode in about a year, but that's
still fun. Yeah, that show's really fun. And you did an episode with them.
Actually, I did 2. I did our favorite Tom Petty songs.
Right.
Did Fleetwood Mac. So,
I remember. I listened to both those, and I think it was funny that I was trying to think of a different way to do this. I was like, and I sent it to you. I was thinking it was you, but I listened to so much stuff. Yeah. So, all right, my first one is Blizzard of Oz by Ozzy Osbourne. Released in 1981. I'm going to say the dates for a reason. The fun fact is that the band, I thought this was really neat. I just found this out. The band thought that the album was going to come out and it was going to be by Blizzard of Oz. They thought that was going to be the name of the band. And Ozzy changed it to just Ozzy Osbourne. Yeah. And it also features Randy Rhoads, who was a legend, died very young. Why did I pick it? It was one of those albums I listened to, like I said, over and over. But when it came out in 81, Ozzy was on the road. They recorded that album and Diary of a Madman together. And he was on the road. And then he kind of it was one tour for the other tour, they was right together kind of thing. And he was in Memphis, but we used to listen, and I cannot remember. I wanted to say Cottonwood Picture Show or something, but maybe that's not the name of it. But there was a live concert show on the radio that I listened to I think it was Friday night. And they had Ozzy from Memphis. And he played all these live, and it was awesome. But the funny thing about everything is when they interviewed Ozzy, he was just so out of it, him talking in a British accent.
Right.
And we never understood a word he said, and we made all kinds. And this was, like I said, 81, 82 when they did that. My favorite song, and if you've heard anything on the radio from this, is Crazy Train. So there we go.
Here's a fun fact. Ozzy once told me that he couldn't understand your accent. So all right. So my take on this was I was honestly never a huge fan of Ozzy. He was okay. He was there. I know to me, he was just a metal guy, just another metal singer, but yet I know he's legendary. I know there's people that idolize
in
Ozzy.
that
So
in that
I
music.
get the pick, but to me, just I know, and I mean, this will be sinful to some metal fans, but to me, just another metal guy. So, but
Nah.
I get it. So before I get to my 10, we should have people tweet us or X us. I'm sorry, on tally up. What albums are in your top 10? Who has the better list?
Right.
We can
Any
have
of
people
these?
vote.
Yeah.
Vote and say. I'm just curious to see who has the better list. So, all right, my 10B is 2112 by Rush. One of the great concept albums of all time. I love the way Geddy Lee, Neil Peart, or Peart, if you say it that way, and Alex Lifeson were just masters of their instruments, as well as the voice. Geddy Lee is on my Mount Rushmore. Three of my rock singing Mount Rushmores are on this list tonight. My fun fact about Rush is that the original drummer was named John Rutsey. He appeared on one album, the very first album, which was the album that had Working Man on it. And then Neil Peart joined, and the rest is history. They became legends from there. For me, on 2112, my favorite song is 2112 itself, which is the whole thing is just a masterpiece. It's basically the whole entire album side. It was just a masterful production. Just always a big fan of Rush, and 2112 is the epitome of Rush.
I have nothing to say about Rush.
Okay, all right. So
the old saying: "If you ain't got anything good to say, don't say
anything at
all."
all. No,
but I do want to shout out my buddy Lloyd. Lloyd Rory was one of my best friends in high school. Still one of my good friends. Huge Rush fan. Huge Rush fan. There's no telling how many times he's seen them live. So shout out to Lloyd. I'm gonna shout out some of my high school and my college buddies for some of this music list here.
And I know one of the things that what you're hinting at is how polarizing Geddy Lee's voice is. I know people love Geddy Lee, like myself, and I know people hate Geddy Lee's voice.
I think it's a love-hate with him.
I think that's
really
part
is.
of it. Why you're saying if I got nothing good to say, I'm not going to say anything at all.
Maybe
so I
one
get it.
song I've never listened to a whole album. So, and I go with that. Lance, how I am, even with wrestling or whatever. If I've never listened to it, I can't say, "Oh, that album sucks," because I think that's stupid when people do that. So
all right, at 9A is your next pick, which is Scarecrow by John Cougar Mellencamp, or is it
this
just
was
John
Mellencamp? This was just John Mellencamp. Okay. 1985 release. The band spent a whole month. This is my fun fact about this album. They spent a whole month in the studio. And instead of rehearsing, they were rehearsing, but instead of doing it for the album, actual songs from the album, they were just playing old rock and roll songs. They were trying to get a feel so that they would have kind of a new sound. And when I saw Mellencamp in Memphis for the second time, he was on this tour and he did about 20 minutes of Elvis when he first opened, and it was really neat. I picked it because, as I said, I played it many times. I felt like it was, at the time, it was the best thing he had ever done. The writing was so good. He was becoming a rock star. Plus, he was doing all kinds of the stuff where he was just being a good guy kind of thing. Huge Mellencamp fan for a long time. And my favorite song, and it's because it's Small Town, because I felt that song so much because, the town I grew up in was 2,200 people and you knew everybody, you knew everything. And that was the song for us.
I know it's the wrong album and the wrong song, but Sucking on Chili Dogs. There we go. So I will say I was a big fan of Mellencamp. Loved him. I think this was one of his best albums at the apex of his career. I preferred his earlier, more commercially kind of stuff because, like you kind of referenced, he kind of got very serious and very socially active, and he became a lot less fun, I thought, later on in his career. A lot more Bob Dylan-y, and I'm not a Bob Dylan fan. So I thought on this album, Rain on the Scarecrow is my favorite song on here. But there were 4 huge hits on this album. So I think this was a really great pick for you. This was a really good under the radar pick that you're not going to see him commonly on people's top 10 lists. So I think this was a really good, like, under the radar pick for you. So.
And that was, the thing about it was when I was a junior and senior in high school, he was just so huge at the time, and we were such big fans. We had went to see him, and then I got a chance to go see him again. Someone had a free ticket and said, "Hey, you want to go?" It was funny. Let me tell you a story of John Mellencamp. The second time I seen him, it was and I have to say this so that we'll understand the joke or the funny thing about it was there's a guy by the name of Maurice Carter, shout out to Maurice, who offered a ticket to go see John Mellencamp. And Maurice was a black guy. And we rode to Memphis and went into the concert. And guess how many black people were at the concert? One. Maurice Carter.
Yep. I know people who aren't watching didn't see that, but I put up one finger because I knew from.
But yeah, and he was a huge fan of Mellencamp's and all kinds of music. He was huge into music, so it was fun to be at a concert with him. Very fun time.
Good deal. That's Mellencamp. I'm jealous. Mellencamp's one of the few on my list that I haven't seen. So, all right, my 9B is The Cars, the debut album by The Cars. So it is the 1978 debut. One of two debut albums I have on my list. So I've been lucky enough to see The Cars. I saw them in the late 80s, 88, 89, whenever it was, with Rick Ocasek and Benjamin Orr before they both untimely passed away. One takeaway that I can talk about from the concert was it was the coldest show I'd ever seen in terms of like no banter on stage, just very mechanical, very robotic. But their sound defined the 80s, defined new wave to me. I loved Benjamin Orr's voice. I loved Rick Ocasek's voice, although they were very similar and hard to tell apart, kind of a quirkier version of the same type of voice. Every song on this album was a hit. Every song was a radio staple on this album. You forget how many hits the Cars had, and half of them were on this album. So classic 3 to 4 minute pop songs, pop rock songs here. Fun fact was, did you know that in 2005, Todd Rundgren reformed the Cars with a couple members of the Cars, redid their greatest hits, and they called it the New Cars. And so it was excellent. It was literally Todd Rundgren and his band with a couple members of the Cars. So fantastic stuff. On this album, on the Cars debut album, my favorite song, this was tough to pick, but I said, You're All I've Got Tonight, which was ironically
great
a
song.
Rick Ocasek song when I prefer Benjamin Orr's vocals, but this was a Rick song. So yeah, You're All I've Got Tonight. So I got the Cars at number 9.
I'm not a Cars hater, but it wasn't one of those bands that I listen to all the time. But that's a great song. Good pick though. That was kind of, to me, kind of under the radar when it comes to the Cars. So yeah.
So, all right, number 8 for you is Gold and Platinum. It is Leonard Skinner.
And I'm going to tell you, and we had talked about something before we got on, but I got spoiler alert. I got 2 greatest hits in here, and the reason why is that was how I was introduced to the bands. Was the greatest hits. This Leonard Skinner was given to me by my cousin Steve Jackson. He introduced me to Leonard Skinner, and it was the Gold and Platinum. And it was after the crash, after they died, kind of greatest hits. And I didn't get into them until after all the first albums were released. So it had tons of the songs on, and which is kind of funny. It also had a live version of Freebird, and that was a fun fact for me because it was live, and I thought that's the only way they ever recorded Freebird. And it's on some of those first albums. In Columbia House, Columbia House actually had this as one of their top, where you could order it all the time. I mean, I remembered the cover, and it took me a while because I kept typing greatest hits, but it was Gold and Platinum. Why did I pick it? I listened to it all the time. I absolutely loved it. I had it on 8-track. It's not the only one on the list that I had on 8-track, but I had it on 8-track. And it is, if you grew up during that time in the South, Leonard Skinner was the band. They really were, and they was one of those bands that helped me get started listening to music, and hanging out with my cousin. So my favorite song is Simple Man, and I can still listen to it over and over, even today. So
I think there's probably, like you said, there's kind of a geographic thing here. with them with you, because there's a band coming up towards my top actually that I think is for geographic reasons they're on here. Many hits, of course, on this album, but as I told you before, I'm strongly against using a greatest hits album here. And I get what you just said. I get it, because this was your gateway to get into that band.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it was.
I
And you
understand
always
it.
went to it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I look at putting a greatest hits album on a top 10 list as cheating, because you're basically compiling all of their best songs.
I didn't remember it's the way we chose them wasn't wrong, and only chose mine because I had played it more.
So-
Something funny too that I knew this, but after I was doing a little research, is that I have never listened to, and my buddy Lloyd has, but I've never listened to their albums before this greatest hits. So I've never went back and listened to the full album of those. So it will be interesting. I mean, here we got 3 or 4 albums there I could go back and listen to that I've never heard. So yeah.
So, a lot of good songs from them. They were just kind of an act that was there for me. If I turned on classic radio today and they played Freebird, or they played, whatever, Give Me My Money or whatever the songs, I'd be okay with them. I don't turn it off. Let's put it that way. And it just sounds like they're just another part of the tapestry of what is classic rock radio for me. So I just, like I said, philosophically, I disagree with you on the top 10 or on the greatest hits thing.
I got a quick. Go ahead.
I know you got another one coming up. So
I got a quick Leonard Skinner story with Rock 103 was our classic rock. It wasn't classic rock then. It was classic rock, but I guess it'd be real classic now if it was still there. But it was Rock 103. It was the Rockin' Walrus. It was the top station we listened to all the time, and they had a soundbite, a legit soundbite. Some guy called in and said, "Would you play Freebird for my cousin Bubba? He just got out of jail." And that is it's one of the greatest sound bites ever. He just got out of jail. But yeah, I thought it was funny that I thought Freebird was live all the time, but it was only live on here and a couple of other songs. So yeah, go ahead.
All right. So my 8B is Songs from the Big Chair by Tears for Fears. A kind of a bookend band with the Cars, the Tears for Fears being a bookend with that in terms of similar styles and similar type of music. The production on Tears for Fears music is just so clean and so crisp. Even live seeing them, everything is just so clean. But the records are all just so well recorded, so well put together. Tears for Fears is basically Roland Orzabal and Kurt Smith, main 2 guys. Only 7 albums. Their entire catalog is only 7 albums. And ironically, 2 of them are without Kurt Smith. So what that tells me is that Roland Orzabal is really the brains of the operation, because those 2 albums were really good too. Songs from the Big Chair was their second album, came out in 1985. 6 out of 8 songs were released as singles. So that's an amazing batting average for them, that 6 out of 8 songs were released as singles. My favorite on here was Head Over Heels. Shout was a huge hit. Everybody Wants to Rule the World, both enormous hits on this album, but Head Over Heels was my favorite. And here's the fun fact on the Songs from the Big Chair tour. They were in Kansas City. They went into a bar in Kansas City at their hotel. They met a young lady by the name of Oleta Adams singing in the hotel. They hit it off with her, and they went on to record Woman in Chains with her for their next album, which was The Seeds of Love. One of literally my favorite songs of all time is Woman in Chains. So I thought that was such a cool story that's how they met. And then they took her under their wing, and she actually had a career after that incident. So Songs from the Big Chair, fantastic album, number 8 for me.
Everybody Wants to Rule the World was one of those songs, much like I got a few of those, a B-52 song, the rhythmic song that I was not fans of growing up or when they came out. And then as I got older, all of a sudden, I love that song, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. And it's just one of those songs that it reminds me, what you said is when you listen to radio and it comes on, you're going to listen to it. But they never was a band that I would buy. I never bought, an album or anything from them. And Lance, you give me hell about misspelling something. So I was just going to let this go by, and I've got to get you on this one. You listed this as Songs from the Bug Chair.
Oh.
So Songs from the Bug Chair.
Stupid spell check. All right. Moving on from my one typo.
Ugh.
Your next, your
That I
7 8.
found. So yeah.
Yeah, that you
And I
found.
never see typos. You know, I told you my little
Right.
defect I
Yeah.
have. So
So your 7A is Eagles Greatest Hits Volume 1. So go for it.
it was another reason why, as I was introduced by this, my mother played this album a lot. Big Eagles fan, and
Mhm.
I actually have never listened to the albums before this. Not a lot of the complete albums after this. Even Hotel California, it was that song kind of thing, and a few
Mhm.
songs off of that album. But this was one thing that I went back to over and over. An 8-track tape, by the way. And but I think it's loaded with songs, and it is cheating, but it was another one of those where I didn't listen to the whole albums at that point in my musical listening to. All I was doing was just listening to songs.
Mhm.
It came out in 76, but I don't think I started listening to it probably till 79 or 80. Fun fact, the front cover of the greatest hits has an eagle skull on it, and I never knew what the hell that was. And like I said, I picked it because I listened to it a lot. 8-track, my mom listened to it, and I probably listened to Hotel California more than any of these songs,
Mhm.
but it came after these. My favorite song from all of the hits is Desperado.
Okay. Um, so again, I'm not going to say anything about the cheating. What's interesting here is that this album is in the top 10 sales of all time. So
Oh
this,
wow.
you hear about this, you hear about Rumors, you hear about Thriller, but these of Back in Black, these are always mentioned in your top selling albums of all time. Eagles' greatest hits, for whatever reason, that's still in the top 10. And I promise you, we did not plan this. This was the one thing about our list that kind of was interesting to see. My 7 is The Long Run by the Eagles. So just complete coincidence that we both had the Eagles at number 7. I went with the studio album. It was a coin flip. You mentioned Hotel California. Coin flip for me between Hotel California and The Long Run, which was the follow-up to Hotel California. The Eagles, two magnificent singers, Don Henley and Glenn Frey. Then you had Timothy B. Schmidt and Joe Walsh. I'm like, that's just too much fucking talent
Oh,
for
just
one
so
band.
much talent,
So
so
much
much
talent.
talent.
Unfair. Just unfair. So I have not seen the Eagles, one of my big regrets, but they
I
are
have
coming in
not.
the
Yeah, me
spring.
too.
They're coming in the spring, so I'm going to get to see at least what is remaining of the Eagles at that point in March. I've seen Don Henley in concert a couple times. Just excellent show. I think the Eagles saying this is their final tour is basically the Terry Funk retirement speech at this point, because the Eagles
If
have
you're a wrestling
retired.
fan, you'll get that one. So
Yeah.
there you go.
The Eagles have retired and stopped touring numerous times. So this came out. Long Run was 1979, had 3 big hit singles. For me, the number one song, a little bit under the radar, and if you hear it, you'll know what song I'm talking about. It's called King of Hollywood. It's about a sleazy Hollywood producer. It is basically the Harvey Weinstein story, but it was recorded like 20 years before Harvey Weinstein's name got out there. But it is completely describing that guy's story. Fun fact about the Long Run, or about the Eagles rather, they formed in 1971, and you mentioned Desperado. They were formed to be Linda Ronstadt's backing band. So
I knew that. Yeah,
they
yeah.
were just the backing band for Linda Ronstadt. And also the other fun fact I got too, that catalog of the Eagles, 7 albums. That's all. Just
scary,
that's
ain't
it.
it?
Amazing that they had that many hits and that much notoriety. Literally 7 albums those guys put out.
It's crazy, just
Very
crazy.
much so. All right.
So talented. Long Run's a great album. No crapping on that album. The voice is I don't know. And I think it not only represents the 70s and that time. It just, even if they go on tour now, they're kind of like the Rolling Stones and people like that. It just don't, it don't change. Everyone likes the Eagles. So.
Mm-hmm. So, and then we go to your next pick. Your number 6A is Stranger in Town, Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. You just put Bob Seger, so I had to add.
I did. You had to add the Silver Bullet Band, which I've got a fun fact about the Silver Bullet Band. Bob Seger was a guy, and the reason I picked it was also my cousin Steve turned me on to this group. I remember listening to a lot of albums going, back to back, each song, but I loved each song on this album. And what I did was, it also, you always talk about this, but this and one of the albums later on is that it had the lyrics in it.
Mhm.
And so I think I really got into this album, not because I liked his voice and everything, but it's because it had all the lyrics and I could read everything. Against the Wind's another really good album by
Mhm.
Bob Seger, but this is my favorite. The fun fact is, the Silver Bullet Band actually only played on half of these songs. So you had half of the, and you had the Muscle Shoals rhythm section who played on a bunch of albums, but they played the other half of the song. So kind of fun. One of the hits, or everyone's heard, We've Got Tonight. It was remade, a country version of it. It's a great song. But the opening song of this album is called Hollywood Nights.
Mhm.
And I love
Yeah.
that song, always
Great.
have, and
Yep.
just awesome song.
So for me, Bob Seger is kind of, he's one of those guys that you don't really realize how much you liked him and how good he was until you start looking at all the singles that
Oh,
you know by
man,
that
yeah.
guy. I'm like, holy shit, I totally forgot that he had that many great songs. I don't have this album. He doesn't bother me. He's there. Again, he's kind of the tapestry of classic rock radio. But for me, this album had 5 big hits on it. But for me, I was looking at the different albums. The Distance was the one that I picked out. If I was going to
Really
pick a
good
Bob
album.
Seger
Yeah,
album,
yeah.
I thought it was stronger. Even Now, Shame on the Moon, and Roll Me Away were such fantastic songs. So I can see Bob Seger, again, like your John Mellencamp pick. I can see him getting in there. 18 albums. I looked that up too. He had 18 albums so far. And he's still alive.
He's
So you never
somebody
know.
I
We
did get to see
get more.
live. Yes, I would love to see him live. I haven't got a chance to see it. I always told myself that would be one of the bands I would go see.
Yeah.
And he's got some live albums too that are just
Yeah.
fabulous. I mean,
Nice
just
pick.
so good for
I like the way you're finding some under the radar stuff that isn't
Yeah.
on everybody's list. So, all right, wrapping up our top 6 is my 6B, which is The Pretenders, my other debut album pick. So, The Pretenders' first album. Chrissie Hynde is my female rock and roll hero. She's a badass chick. She takes no shit. And plus, I've always, and if you've a longtime listener of TRS, I have a soft spot for bands that are all dudes with a female front person, like Heart, Fleetwood Mac, Pretenders. I could go on and on. So I love that. They lost 2 members originally, the 2 of the original members due to drugs right away. And Chrissie Hynde has still been going and still been soldiering on as the Pretenders all this time since then. Rock chick, but she can also melt you with the beautiful vocals like the ballads, I'll Stand By You, 2,000 Miles. On the front cover of The Pretenders, her in the red leather jacket is just an iconic album cover. Like, that is one of my favorite album covers of all time, just because she looks so badass in there. Favorite song on this one is Mystery Achievement. It's just a simple pick for me, just a pulsing rocking song. And my fun fact is I love Chrissie Hynde, but man, that Bob Dylan covers album she did was a rough go for me. I not a fan.
And the funny thing is, I like that. That was a funny thing. I remember you.
Yeah.
I had actually listened to it, and after you had
I reviewed
kind
it
of
on
bashed
TRS.
it, and I was like, because I'm not in disagreement with you with Bob Dylan but for the songwriting,
Yeah.
I really like his songwriting. I've never been a fan of listening to him, but if someone else is singing his music,
Right, exactly.
I'm good. I'm good with it, and I think he's very talented when it comes. I never have bought a Pretenders album, so there you go. I never was into the female singer. There's only very few female rockers or female singers I was into.
Yep.
One was when I was young, and you mentioned her, was Linda Ronstadt, really talented.
Yeah.
In of the country music that I've listened to, there's a few female singers that I've seen live, believe it or not. Trisha Yearwood, Garth's wife, and just a huge fan of hers. All right. Well, I'm gonna let you say, what time is it, Lance?
It's finna be halftime. We're gonna take a commercial break and we're gonna come back with halftime with our top 5 after this.
All right, halftime with the Record Store. I'm his guest this week, but I want to say a couple things. Number one, this is the last of I Want to Rocktober. This last episode this Monday here today. Also, there was two things I thought of when I went through all of these albums. We both of us, and I'll let you explain what you think your reasoning is on it, and whether I agree or not. Is if you look at the dates of all of these albums that were released in these groups, it's we never got past our graduation date. The only album that's
You
past
got
your
one
graduation,
coming up.
is one coming up. That's it.
Oh
That's
no,
it.
my number 2.
What did it say? What was your number
My
two?
number 2 is very recent.
Your number two. Your number two.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So
that
in
was
rare cases, in rare
Yeah,
cases.
yeah. So it's really weird that, and I was listening to someone talking about this, about all the stuff that we did as kids, that we, it's not just the nostalgia part of it. It's just like we don't want to lose it. We don't want, and we're
Yeah.
like me and you. I sometimes I look at the stuff that you review on the record store, like the effing Monkeys, and I'm go, why is he doing that? But then I started looking at my list, and I'm like, I didn't get out of the 80s. I think I
Yeah.
went out of 85 once, and the ones in top 5, a couple of them are out of the 80s. But why do you think that that is? I mean, that's it. I can't. You can't listen to rap music. I can't listen to. I can, but I can't listen to Taylor Swift. I can't listen to pop
Boring.
music right now.
Yeah.
I just not a fan. I mean, if you enjoy Taylor Swift, go for it. I wouldn't walk across the street to see her. But these albums was when I was growing up and really getting into it. I think that's the key for me.
Yeah, I think it's two things. Like you said, it's the soundtrack to those, wonderful days of our youth. It's the soundtrack to that. Shout out to John McAdam. So it's the fond memories of those albums. And then it also kind of goes along with your reasoning for making your list altogether. You listen to these albums, and myself too. We listened to them hundreds and hundreds of times until they became ingrained in our heads, and we knew every lyric of every song because we listened to them so many times. We don't have the luxury of doing that today. We're adults. We have, kids, and we have jobs, and we have responsibilities. Believe me, I wish I could listen to, the latest release by whoever over and over again until I had it memorized. The Pretenders' new album, which I love, I'd probably listened to it maybe 3 or 4 times total. But that first album, probably hundreds of times before we got out of the 80s, So I think it's that ingraining it in your head and loving those songs and having the luxury of being able to, we have too much media, whether it's TV,
maybe that's
streaming,
it. Yeah,
movies,
I don't know.
reading, whatever. We have too much going on right now that we didn't have in the 70s and 80s.
I gravitate when it comes to new music. I gravitate to stuff you cannot understand most of the time. Just a heavy, or I gravitate to that sound that was Bob Seger, Leonard Skinner, kind of and it's Hootie now. I love listening to him sing. Hootie from the Blowfish. But it's just that sound, and it's considered country, but back then it wasn't really country. Country's totally different now. It's almost pop. But I like what you're saying there. I really do. Something you've asked many times on the record store that I have an answer for every time that you ask it, and I'm going to give you the answer right now. You say, are they still the band? Are they still the band, even though they only have maybe one member? I say yes. And the reason why I look at it like that is I look at the bands almost, if they can play the song. Leonard Skinner is a perfect example. No original members. They sound just the same, blah, blah, blah. To me, they sound great. They're good. But I also think about this when it comes to a sports team. Like your Dodgers are not the same Dodgers you grew up. They got new members, but they're still the Dodgers. But that's the way I look at it. I never have a problem with them getting a new guitarist, even with Kiss changing members like they did. They were still Kiss to me, which really going to be fun to see what Kiss does when they said they officially quit, but there may be 4 new members of Kiss hit the road to play the song.
Yeah, they've teased that a lot, that they're just going to keep this going with 4 different guys.
Yeah.
Journey is the band that stands out to me with what you just said, because in many cases with these bands, as long as you have the singer, you can replace the guitarist, the drummer,
But they don't even have the singer, and it sounds like him.
Most of these cases, you'll say, yeah, it's still the Beach Boys because they still have Mike Love or whatever. But with Journey, they have maybe one or two original guys or early on guys, and then that singer, that Arnel Pineda, sounds just like Steve Perry, and they're still calling themselves Journey. So that's an interesting one. But I go back and forth on the subject. It's not, as important.
I know, but you ask it a lot, so it was one of those things. And my third little point for halftime is I got you a personal question. So Lance, it's just me and you here, okay?
Right,
no one else
listening.
is listening.
All right, private.
What, if any of these top 10 albums, have you had sex while listening to?
Oh, my number one for sure. It's coming up. multiple times.
I would go with Bob Seger and Stranger in Town. We've got tonight. I think that happened. Yeah, we are talking with sex with other people. Okay, everyone knows. Let everybody know that.
Show is not for the kiddos.
That's right. Here we go. That was halftime, folks. Halftime.
All right, we are back, and that was what were they? Ramen Cashews. That was our.
That's Ramen Cashews, right? Yeah.
Again, Ramen Cashews, straight from Memphis. So we're back for our top five. Your top five, my top five on the Record Store. Our great crossover Marvel versus DC edition. So we're at number 5A, which is your pick, and it is Alive. Ironically, it's Alive by Kiss.
1975 it was released. I didn't get the album until and it's really weird. I can tell you when I got the album in October of 1976, because as I turned on the television, I watched the special, the October Halloween special, Paul Lynde Halloween special, and they had Kiss on it. And I said, "Oh my God, who are these people?" And I loved them. They were everything that I liked about kind of like just in my face with the makeup, the everything. Absolutely loved it. And went to Kmart the next weekend and actually bought this album, Alive. A fun fact, and I found out many years later about this, is that Kiss, and their other bands do this, and I never knew it, they went into the studio after this album and recorded over the live tracks so that they would be clearer and you could hear them better. This is not my favorite Kiss album, but it had to be one of my top albums because it was my first album. Introduced me to buying albums, and later on Columbia House, where I bought 8 tracks and cassettes. And I want to tell you, Lance, I was B. Trammell, I was Brian Trammell, I was W.B. Trammell, I was William Trammell, I was Glenda Trammell, I was Kenny Trammell, I was Hugh Trammell.
Yeah.
I was there you go. I never cheated them though. I always bought what I was supposed to buy. So there you go.
There was a statute of limitations on that expired for all of us. So all right, I say on this pick, I say a big
Hold on. I'm not done yet. So Rock and Roll All Night is my favorite Kiss album. Kind of under radar on that one because a lot of people pick either Love Gun or Destroyer. My favorite song, and it's the live version of Cold Gin. Just a freaking awesome song. So there we go.
This has a big seal of approval from me. I'm on board with this pick. They were a spectacle. Every teen boy in the 70s loved Kiss. And it was, it was the when you said, like you said, when you saw them on TV, you're like jaw dropped because
they're superheroes. They were superheroes in live and in person, and they were playing rock and roll. So there you go. Was
always a Paul Stanley guy. Were you Paul or
Gene Simmons?
More Gene? I figured as much. Yeah. Okay. Seeing them live was a rite of passage. I got to see them live. Yeah. It was my second concert, and I'll never forget. It was like I was like 16, 17, like you said, and it was like the biggest, most spectacular thing I'd ever seen at that age. So
I saw him with I saw him with Crocus. Do you remember Crocus?
I do remember Crocus. I saw them with Judas Priest, actually.
Oh wow, yeah.
And
awesome,
it is detailed in all the right notes. You should check that out.
Awesome.
But I salute Kiss's business acumen. I salute the longevity for staying around as long as they have. Are they the Beatles? No, but what they did worked. And they always were on top of the world in terms of finances. I don't know if anybody ever made more money in rock than Kiss did.
If you go back and look, though, there's only so many albums that sold really good, and to keep them still selling tickets and being, and everybody knows who Kiss is. It's
Right.
like you said, you got to pat them on the back.
Yep.
So,
and the fact that this was a double album, I think back in that day when that came out, double albums were very rare. I thought that the fact that it sold so much, and it was just rare that a double album was coming out. This was them at their most energetic, their most powerful. This was them at their height. My favorite song was Black Diamond. I love that.
Great
to this
song,
day,
great
I
song.
think Black Diamond is one of my favorite songs. So, all right, that's your 5A. So 5B for me, tough to top Abbey Road by the Beatles. They have to be on the list out of respect. You know, I always ask this, is there a Beatles song you don't know? Could they possibly play a song on the radio by the Beatles that you don't know? On this list, I was forced to pick one album. It's impossible to pick a Beatles album, but on this day, I happen to pick Abbey Road. Fun fact, is there a fun fact to the Beatles? I mean, I feel like we know everything about them. Paul is dead. You know, Pete Best was the original drummer. But no, the fun fact for this, believe it or not, is when Abbey Road came out, it got mixed reviews. And I'm like, what critics in 1969 or whatever this came out, what critics are saying, it's okay. You know, they thought it was inauthentic. They didn't like the special effects that were used on the album. That was some of the criticism of Abbey Road. Ridiculous. So for you to want me to pick a favorite song, every song on this album, is a classic. But I'm going to cheat like you cheated. I'm going to cheat and say the side 2 medley. It's 16 minutes long. It's got You Never Give Me Your Money, Sun King, Mean Mr. Mustard, Polythene Pam, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, and The End. Just magnificent work. A lot of tempo changes in there. Longtime listeners know I'm a big fan of that. So Abbey Road is my top pick for the Beatles at number 5.
I think the Beatles were the same as you said with Skynyrd and Bob Seger's. Like, they were actually on the radio, but not something I went out and bought. Not that I didn't like them. It was just songs that I heard, kind of thing. This album is, like you said, every song on it's good. It's nothing. The weird thing is I've heard every song, but I cannot remember whether I know I didn't own it, but I do know I sat down and listened to an album one night with my buddy Ronnie Forbes, and it was a Beatles album, but I cannot remember which one it was. I don't think it was this one, but every song's good. My favorite song on this is Come Together, which is really funny because I hate to admit this, but did not know the Beatles did this song until I heard the Aerosmith version. So there you go. But yeah, I love their version too.
So, all right, we get to number 4A, which is you. It is Nevermind by Nirvana, your most recent pick in terms of
years.
Years.
Well, it is my most recent pick, isn't it? No, wait. Yes, it is. Yes. No. My number one's more recent than that. My number one.
Oh, it is. You're right.
Yeah.
They're close. They're pretty close.
Yeah. 6 years apart, but yeah, and I have a reason there for that one too. So the fun fact was I found out that Smell Like Teen Spirit, which I put down as the title of this album because that was a song that I remembered so much. It was played on not really a popular, it was kind of popular, but what they did was they just played kind of bizarre songs or songs that they liked. It was called 120 Minutes on MTV. It was like the coolest, and they played it, and all of a sudden everyone wanted to hear it. And then I seen it on MTV, and this was one of those bands, and I can't remember anyone else except maybe Kiss affected me when I saw them on television. But I was in college here in my last year, my 6th year of college for a 4-year degree. I had a new roommate. His name is Shane Howe, and we were watching MTV, and this came out. And this is very well known that it killed hair metal. Nirvana did. I was the whole thing. Alice in Chains, all the grunge bands. I loved all the grunge bands. This totally changed music, the way I listened to it. And I went that very day to Musicland in Jonesboro, Arkansas. and bought this CD, and it had a naked baby on it, which I
Yeah.
felt kind of uncomfortable with.
Felt dirty
But
buying that
yeah,
album. Yeah.
my favorite song is "Come as You Are," and if you've ever heard these guys play this acoustically, unplugged, this is just one of those albums to listen to over and over, and and also thank God I had the lyric sheet, because some of those lyrics I never knew what the hell they were saying. So
I'm telling you, the lyric sheet makes all the difference in some cases. So I'm good with this pick. Nirvana was the soundtrack of the 90s, basically. I mean, this was such a huge album. Literally 3 albums in their catalog. It's hard to believe that band is so widely recognized as for their greatness, and literally 3 albums. So I can't argue this pick at all. When I was thinking about it, though, what would Kurt Cobain be doing today? He would be 56 years old. Would he be cool like Dave Grohl and respected? Would he be a recluse and just completely off the radar? Or would he have sold out? You don't know. Obviously, we don't know the answer, but it's interesting to speculate what would have happened with Kurt Cobain had he survived.
Yeah, very strange to wonder. And there's so much surrounding his death and what happened and all that.
Who did it?
I almost said fun stuff, kind of thing. But and I went back and listened to Bleach and some of the earlier stuff, and never was a huge fan. This was the album that I listened to all the time.
Yeah,
so.
Connected. So, all right, my number 4B is Dream Police by Cheap Trick. This is my geographic pick because I have a special place in my heart for Cheap Trick, being from Illinois. They're from Rockford, which is not that far from Chicago. I, again, salute their longevity. They never slowed down. These guys have been on the road touring since like the early 70s to this day. For me, Dream Police was a coin flip between this album and Heaven Tonight, both of their real breakthrough albums. I went with Dream Police because I love the title track, so much energy in that. Voices is a fantastic ballad on this album. I Know What I Want, which is Tom Peterson singing lead, which is a rare song for them, rare that Tom Peterson sings. But my favorite song on this album is Gonna Raise Hell. Just a long, plodding rock song, just fantastic. Love this album. Love everything about every song on this is a classic for me. Fun fact is I've seen Cheap Trick second most times of any band that I've ever seen, probably about 20-ish times that I've seen Cheap Trick overall. And this is only their 4th album. They've released 20 albums. They're still recording. It came out a year or two ago. This was only their 4th. So this was one of their greatest albums early on in their career. So Dream Police, my number 4, my friend.
Yeah, big Cheap Trick fan. You know I am. My favorite album of theirs was Live at Budokan. And wanted to go to Japan to see concerts there just because that was before I was a wrestling fan, a Japanese wrestling fan. But I always thought that this would be. I saw them live here in Jonesboro. Just so good, good live. And the girl I went with to the concert, she was wearing jeans like they wear these days, them kids, where the jeans are all ripped, and she was wearing jeans and she was really hot, and she let me lick her leg. So there we go. I got to lick her leg there when I went and seen Cheap Trick. And a shout out to Steve Crawford. Every time I think of Cheap Trick, I think of Steve Crawford because he's a huge fan also. Excellent. And he might have seen them as many times as you have. So
yeah. I mean, I just saw him literally about 2-3 months ago at the Metro. Just still fantastic, still energetic, just great performing, great touring band, great recording band on this album too. So, all right, number 3A for you is Back in Black. I kind of mentioned it before in terms of popularity. Back in Black by AC/DC.
Just when it comes to rock and roll and the heavy metal, that kind of boom, boom, boom. That's what I always think of it is. I love this album. It was one of those albums also that I liked every song from, and it made me realize, hey, you can listen to the whole album. You don't have to listen to just the hit songs. This is probably everyone knows this, but this was the first album that had Brian Johnson on it as the lead singer after Bon Scott died. So I knew no history whatsoever about Bon Scott. This album has sold over 50 million albums. Just freaking crazy. I love it all. This was, like I said, one of the very first albums that I loved every song on it and played them all. I like the song Have a Drink on Me. I love all the little funny parts of songs, Hell's Bells, everything that they do. But it's something that ACDC people have said about ACDC, which is so true, is that almost every song sounds the same now. But my favorite song, they have a sound, let's just put it that way. But my
Yeah.
favorite song on this is You Shook Me All Night Long. Just always a rocking song that I can listen to anytime, any day, and get me in the mood. So, and I used to play one of their songs, Thunderstruck, before I worked out every day. So it was my pre-workout song
To get you going.
to get me going. Yep.
You stole all my tidbits that I had on this. So I'll just say, yes, I have this album. I have it on vinyl, and yes, I like this album. I probably wouldn't have it anywhere near my top 10, but I got to respect the fact that it did sell over 50 million copies, and just amazing. And you mentioned the singing. I had that too. It's fascinating to me that that's when they took off. When the new singer came in, that's when they took off in terms of their, the number of sales. They were already well known at that point when Bon
And they
Scott
sound alike too. I mean, they sound a lot alike.
similar.
If you go back and listen to the old stuff, you're just like, huh?
Yeah,
That's another
definitely
person.
similar song, similar singing style, just
Yeah,
like Rick
yeah.
Ocasek and Benjamin Orr. So, all right, that takes us to 2A. So this is your second pick that you forgot about in the initial list. So your second pick is "Bad Out of Hell" by Meatloaf.
That's right. You didn't do your 3B.
Oh, I didn't do my 3B. Let's go back. We should edit that out. Whoever produces this, edit that out. So
I'm not editing. Look.
So there's a blooper. You get me next year. So 3B is "Who's Next" by The Who. I'm sure many people will have that as their number one album. There's definitely a contingent of people that will have that at number one. Roger Daltrey is my other Mount Rushmore pick. That's my third Mount Rushmore in terms of rock singers. Ann Wilson is my fourth. Didn't make the list as far as top albums. So I was lucky enough to see The Who. I saw them live in 1982 as the It's Hard tour, when they still had John Entwistle. Already had lost Keith Moon by that point, but at least I got to see 3 out of the 4. Who's Next was their fifth album, came out in 1971. Come on. Baba O'Reilly, Won't Get Fooled Again, which is my favorite song on the album. Behind Blue Eyes, Bargain, Going Mobile. Every song is a hit. These are rock anthems. This album is an anthem. So my fun fact, and on this one, the album cover, the classic album cover of them pissing on the rock, the big rock, Stonehenge type of rock. Them pissing on the rock was almost not the cover of the album originally. They had 2 last candidates that just missed the cut. Keith Moon in lingerie was at one point scheduled to be the album cover, which would have been disgusting. The other album cover that they were going to go with was a fat woman naked with their faces covering her naughty bits, so that you wouldn't see the naked woman on the cover. But it was supposed to be an overweight woman on the cover with Keith Moon and Roger Daltrey, their heads covering her body. So Who's Next? Just an absolute masterpiece of a classic album at number 3 for me. And I see
these guys go right back to, they were on rock radio they'll listen to, and never bought a Who album whatsoever. Never. They were way under my radar. No. I mean, you said 3 or 4 songs there, and maybe one of them I could remember it in my mind, but probably if you played them all, I would probably know the lyrics from the words, but just it was just part of the radio there. You said we got coming up with the last 2 picks. You said this was the only one I left out.
Yeah.
And I left this out.
It was Meatloaf, Bad Out of Hell.
Yeah, and you had sent your honorables in this. Spoiler alert. This is on your honorables, and I just completely forgot this. This was. And we're both big Meatloaf fans. And this sound is totally different than anything I had ever listened to at the time. And it was the reason why I picked it. And the songwriter has Steinman has so many different other songs from other artists like Cher. That's kind of my fun fact with it. And he's just so talented. And after this, Meatloaf kind of loses his voice. Then he comes back. I don't know if it's because they can work stuff. They can work stuff out in the studio a little bit better. But this was one of those albums that he just could not recapture the magic that was on this album. And like I said, because I felt like it was something I'd never heard. Paradise by the Dashboard Light, with the radio, the radio playing, and them having sex, and him saying he'll be with this girl forever. She'll just have sex with him, and then he's praying for the end of time. I I did this with shout out to Wendy. I can't even remember her last name, but we did this song together on a coffee table in college, and I might have been intoxicated. I just want you to know that.
No.
Yes. And this is so funny, but when I was in high school, me and my buddy Ronnie Forbes actually wrote a story based on this album. And every song had something to do with the story. We gave it to this girl to type up, and she never gave it back to us. She lost it. I can't even remember what her last name was Holder. So if your last name's Holder and you have my Meatloaf Bat Out of Hell story, then please, we had some really corny shit on it. The end of the story was we had a G.I. Joe falling on a Hot Wheels, and they had killed all the people that was in our little movie, our little story, and that's when we played the song Heaven Can Wait. So there you go. And my favorite song is Heaven Can Wait is one of my favorite songs, kind of under the radar, and Paradise by the Dashboard Light was my favorite one there.
So this was a late cut for me. I mean, it just missed it. It's a rock classic for sure. Meatloaf, magnificent theatrical voice, theatrical music. I think that's what you were kind of
so
implying.
Different. Yeah.
The writing of Jim Steinman just matched so perfectly with his voice and that presentation. 43 million albums sold to this day.
Is that all
on the charts? Yeah, only 43 million. It was my number 11, so it just made the cut. The only reason it didn't make my top 10 is because, like I said, I ranked my favorite artists of all time, and he wasn't in my top 10. So, but definitely as a respect of that achievement and that accomplishment of what that album is, it's got to be up there. So yeah, it's in my honorables. I'm glad I had it in there, and so you rocketed it all the way up to your number 2 pick. In your amended list.
As soon as I saw it, I was just like, how did I forget that? And it was one of those that had all the lyrics too on it, and the back cover was different, and you wondered when you first got the album, who the hell is that? So
and I think it's partially it's what you said too. He went down quite a bit after this, then he came up a little bit, then down again. His career was so inconsistent with the ups and downs. He did like a dozen albums, but nothing got the attention that this got, and he was never.
You reviewed one on the record store.
Yeah.
What was it? And it was good. It was still good.
Paradise, or it was the Down and Out by the Five and Dime, or something like that.
That was a really good album. It really was. But I think
definitely there was some good stuff after this, but nothing recaptured this.
Nothing.
Absolutely magical, right time, right place. So all right, so that was your 2. So my 2 is my most recent pick. It was 2014. It's Hypnotic Eye. This is definitely going to be one of the under the radar picks for us. So Hypnotic Eye is my favorite album by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Tom is my rock and roll hero. It's no secret. Fleetwood Mac is my favorite band, but if I have to pick a single artist that affected me more than anybody else ever in rock, it's Tom Petty. Picking a favorite album of his was a challenge, obviously. Damn the Torpedoes, Hard Promises, Long After Dark. They all had hits, but there was something about Hypnotic Eye that just resonated with me. It was a great album from start to finish. It followed Mojo, which was kind of a meh for me. It was my least favorite Tom Petty album ever. And it followed that. So it represented like an amazing comeback to me personally, because I wasn't a fan of Mojo. Hypnotic Eye came out a couple years later, and it was just fantastic. And the story it tells is the fact that it's the last album by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. So it becomes like so much more than just the album itself because of that too. Debuted at number 1 on the charts. It was his only album that ever hit number 1. It debuted at number 1 altogether. Every song is about a 4-minute run, just perfect song lengths. Everything about it is just so good. If you like Tom Petty and you love his catalog and you don't know this, and you're one of those people that's like, oh, I prefer the old stuff, you're doing yourself a disservice by not checking out Hypnotic Eye. It's just a fantastic album. Right there, his best overall, in my opinion, is this album. Best song on here is the lead track. It's called American Dream Plan B. And it's just, again, it's just what this album represents, and the fact that it was his last one before he passed away. And just the fact that he still had it in 2014, the guy still had it. So Hypnotic Eye is my number 2, my friend.
I was surprised after you told me the way you did it, the way you actually came up with your list, that you would pick this one instead of and my favorite. And for some reason, I think this should be everybody's favorite, is Full Moon Fever. I love that album. I listened to it a lot. It didn't make my top, but I was a huge Tom Petty fan. Liked Free Fallin', I Won't Back Down. That first, if you go by just sides, the first side is just so good. And also a fan of a lot of his music. Just Tom Petty was unbelievable. And I think I'll save something for Patreon about Tom Petty. But love the song, Running Down the Dream. I mean, I've never listened to the brand new album, so that'd be something for me to go out of my way to listen to this one.
I will give you a minor technicality here. Full Moon Fever was Tom Petty, not Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Still. Just as good. Don't get me wrong. I love that album too. But it wasn't the Heartbreakers.
What was the name of the band that he made with all the
Mudcrutch? He did Mudcrutch. Oh, and Traveling Wilburys.
Yeah, I love the Traveling. Yeah. See, I loved all that. So
Mudcrutch was his first band before the Heartbreakers, and then they did, as a gimmick, they brought it back and they did a couple songs.
I never listened to that one either.
But yeah, Traveling Wilburys, obviously classic. You got so much talent there, except for Bob Dylan. All right, so we're up to number 1.
Great songwriter.
Our top picks. So you're gonna go first. So your 1A is Appetite for Destruction.
This is a record store, extra large, by the way, just to let you know. This album, Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses, released 6 years after Nevermind, and I think the reason it kind of took me away from the grunge. This was a rock and roll album. This was from start to finish. I just listened to it over and over. And there was a guy in my hometown that turned me on to it. He probably don't even know it, but his name was, it's the same name as one of my other friends, but his name was Philip White. And he was listening to this album. He's a bigger guy. He was driving a little car. I want to say it was red, but all I could see is him pull his hand out and saying, "How about them guns?" real loud, and me not knowing who he was talking about, and then going and listening to Appetite for Destruction. This was my favorite Guns, and although I listened to other Guns albums, I felt like this was it. This was their masterpiece. And the albums in the top 5, is this one better than Bat Out of Hell? Is this better? Maybe, but every day I could listen to this. This is my favorite album. One thing, fun fact, is the original, and you probably know this, the cover art was a painting of a robot. And it was a robot rapist. It was punishing somebody. It was a metal Avenger, and it was just vulgar. And they actually had that cover for sale. You could get it, a special edition in one of those magazines I always bought, but I never bought it. I hated it. I wished I would have. They took it off and then put the album cover that they have now. Picked it because, like I said, they were the bad boys. They were rock and roll. I think the first time I listened to it, from the start to the finish, that's the way I listened to it. Lots of great hits on this, but my favorite song, kind of what do they call these, deep cuts? Is that what the cool kids call it? Is Rocket Queen. I love Rocket Queen. It's the last song on the album. I like every song on it, but for some reason I love Rocket Queen. So it's a rock anthem. It's longer than a usual song, and you could just get into it. So
I say Appetite, obviously a hard rock classic. There's a great Guns N' Roses story in All the Right Notes too. So you should check that out on Amazon.com. Guns N' Roses came out of nowhere. They were just different when they came out in 1987. They were epic. They weren't like any other band, and everything that they released was an epic production. Everything was larger than life with Guns N' Roses from the very beginning to this day. From the very beginning till now, everything was just bigger and more important when they did something than any other band. here's another one. Only 6 albums. If you add up their catalog, it's literally 6 albums. So 5 were before 1993 altogether. Chinese Democracy was in 2008, and yet they still continue. I love Guns N' Roses. I've seen them a couple times now at Wrigley Field. Just an epic experience every time you see them to this day. I think that it's one of those bands, talking about the replacement players again. As long as it's Axl and Slash and probably Duff to a lesser extent, they plow on and they are Guns N' Roses. But yeah, fantastic pick. Love Appetite for Destruction. It's in my honorables. So it is there. You didn't forget that one. So that's a good thing.
No, not at all.
All right. So spoiler alert. My favorite band is Fleetwood Mac. I couldn't do number 1 and have it not be Rumors. They've been my favorite band since 1976. Of course, it started with the crush on Stevie Nicks, but then obviously it got to be way more to it than that. If you're 16 and Stevie Nicks is still a heartthrob, you get a crush on her. So you give the music a chance. So like Guns N' Roses, larger than life. Everything that Fleetwood Mac did was like bigger than the average band's releases. Rumors is on any list of any greatest ever. 40 million albums sold. Equal parts the writing and singing of Stevie, Lindsey Buckingham, and Christine McVie. 3 completely different elements on this band. Hypnotic rock, mysterious chick, the quirky guitarist that got more and more eccentric as the years went on, and then the soulful voice of Christine McVie. It just 3 completely different elements is what made this band for me. The story of their breakup is this album. The story of them having their romances and their marriages and their relationships, that drama became this album. So again, to make a wrestling analogy, we always say that a great angle is somewhat based in reality. And that's exactly what this album is it's all based in reality. These are breakup songs, animosity, friendship, hatred. That's what this album is. That's what Rumors is all about. And that's why it works so well. Favorite song on it, I'll go with The Chain today as my pick. It could be Goldust Woman if you ask me tomorrow, but it's The Chain. And my fun fact about Rumors, again, there's probably not much that people don't know, but The Chain itself is the only song that all 5 members of Fleetwood Mac co-wrote. It's the only song that they all shared writing credit for is The Chain. So my number 1, I could have gone with Tusk. It would be under the radar for some people. I could have gone with an album called Say You Will that came out more recently, still not very recent, but more recently. Say You Will was a fantastic album, but did not have Christine McVie on it. So I had to go with the classic lineup, so it's got to be Rumors at number 1.
It it was one of my mom's favorite albums of all time. She's a huge Fleetwood Mac fan. I always found it really wasn't that long. The album total time was under an hour. I can't remember the total time, but I always remember I could listen to this in a quick period of time. I don't know why I remember that. Go Your Own Way is probably my favorite song, and maybe Dreams on this album, but it is from top to bottom. And like you said, it's got almost every song's a different sound because you got different people writing it, and just it's like these people belong together in writing songs and still sound so good when you hear them. So
yep. So that is it. That is our top 10 for each of us. So our top 20, I guess, per se. Thank you, Brian Trammell, for guesting on this episode of The Record Store, this 51st edition of The Record Store. Stay tuned. We're going to be doing on Patreon, we're going to be doing our honorable mentions. We have a handful of them that just missed the cut for us. So as I like to say, I have fun everywhere I go. And I'm especially thankful for Brian coming on and also doing this Record Store podcast with me. So I appreciate it very much.
And as everyone knows, I love my mama.
That's right. We'll talk to you soon on the next episode of The Record Store in November.
No, in December.
In December.
And it is a Christmas episode.
I got to do that again.
Christmas again. All right. Thanks, guys. All right. We're on Patreon. Hey, I'm starving to death and I got to piss.
Yep.
So I want us to kind of just, we don't have to come up with.
Yeah, we could be rapid fire on these.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go. Go ahead and you want me to do mine and you do yours?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the not in any particular order really. With these, I also listed Fleetwood Mac Rumors, like I said, because of my mom. Jim Croce was another one of those guys that I didn't listen to any of the albums, just the greatest hits. And Photos and Memories was just fantastic. Every song on it, and he had a different sound, but he was the '70s. Does that make sense? It was a '70s sound.
Yeah, for sure.
The Beastie Boys is probably my only quote unquote rap group that I listened to this song, and I mean this album, Lasted to Ill, over and over. And also I listened to NWA a lot, but I couldn't run around and sing their songs. So 30 Seconds to Mars, and you had to look this group up.
Never heard of them.
I'm gonna buy you this album. I'm gonna buy this album CD for you for Christmas. There's your Christmas present. And I want you with open ears listen to this. I used to listen to this. This was later in life when I was at the factory. It was one of my, I had like 10 albums I listened to all the time. This one was really strange. Did you know who the Outlaws was?
I do know who the Outlaws are. In fact, that's one of John's favorite bands too. So he'll get a kick out of you having this on there.
I don't know if it's the same Outlaws. This is the supergroup of Willie and Waylon and all of them.
No, different, not the Outlaws.
No, not the. This is a supergroup that they did. Let's see, Good Hearted Woman, and this was probably the. If you want me to pick a country album I could listen to anytime, and it's a tribute to my dad. My dad loved these guys. He absolutely did. And he was intoxicated one night, passed out. I came through the living room, and he said, "Hey." And I was like, "What?" He said, "I'm going to Luckenbach, Texas." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yep, Waylon and Willie and the boys." And I said, "All right, Dad. Have fun," and just kept on walking. Van Halen or Van Hagar, 5150. This is the first Van Hagar album, and to me is my two favorite Van Halen albums is the very first Van Halen, and the first Van Halen with Sammy Hagar. By the way, Sammy's one of those guys that can still play and sing, and he's all over the AXS network. I believe he owns it. He's on it all the time, playing with different people. In Metallica, Justice for All, most people pick some of their earlier stuff or later stuff. Justice for All was the album that I actually was turned on. That was another ticket that was given to me. Hey, want to go see Metallica? Never listened to Metallica. We went and seen Justice for All, and they had Lady Justice up, and she exploded at the end of the concert and all that. And I've been a Metallica fan ever since. So
I will say on your list, just quick comments. 5150 is a really good choice. And like you said, it was the first with Sammy. Is Sammy better than Dave, or you consider him equal?
I think now, in my opinion, overall, I like all the Sammy stuff better than I do. Not that I didn't like the Dave stuff, but I do like, because I also like Sammy before he was with Van Halen. And I like his... Man, he's one of those guys. If you're an older guy, and I mean, we're not anywhere near his age, but it makes you think. Rick Springfield's one of them too, where they're just living their life, man. They're close. I think he's close to 80, and I know Rick is 70-something years old, and they're just he's just one of those guys. I would love to hang out with Sammy Hagar.
So when I looked it up, just to refresh my memory on 5150, Why Can't This Be Love, Dreams, and Best of Both Worlds. I'm like,
oh, yes.
What a hell of a lineup on that album. What a great album. So
it is so
most
good,
of their albums too, and this is definitely a great pick. My honorables are going to be quick because Bat Out of Hell and Appetite were both on it. So my other two that I had were Born to Run, Bruce Springsteen, the E Street Band legend. You know, this was the album that really made him. He became a touring legend, and I think it was phenomenal. Everybody was always like, wow, did you see Springsteen 3-hour, 4-hour show?
Never saw him.
Just it was phenomenal, like a religious experience seeing Bruce Springsteen. And then my last honorable is Belladonna, Stevie Nicks. So she obviously was the breakout star of Fleetwood Mac. This was her first album. I think it's still her best album. Her classic hits very much blur her solo and her Fleetwood Mac songs. Like, you probably couldn't tell me if Gypsy was a solo album or, a solo or a Fleetwood Mac. You couldn't tell me, whatever. They all kind of blend together. People just don't know. But if you separate them, Belladonna is a fantastic, great album overall. Many hits on there. But Belladonna right under my top 10. So that's it. Those are my honorables because you already touched on two of them.
There was something else that I noticed from our music list, and not is that it's very white. Uh, no, it sounds funny, but I really wasn't trying to be funny
Yeah,
because it's just like it was just so white when I looked at it, and I was like, I listened to Motown, I listened to those
same,
songs,
same.
I didn't like. I remember an album that I bought just before for the cover. Go out and see if you can find the cover. It's Ohio Players,
Hmm.
and it's a
Yep.
naked woman. Oh my
Yep.
god!
I think part of that comes from the fact that the radio we listened to back then was very segregated. It was very separate. Like I'm just off the top of my head, the first black artist that I can remember getting a lot of airplay on radio I was listening to was Prince. I don't
Prince, Michael
yeah,
Jackson. I
it
listened
wasn't
to
by
Michael a
design,
lot.
but
Yeah.
those rock stations back in the day, it was very segregated. Not, like I said, not by design. I love Motown too. To this day, I love putting on Motown at work and just let it play all day. So I think it was just that's kind of how we grew up listening to radio, and that's what their playlists
And
were.
I loved, the thing about it was Thriller's not even an honorable mention, but it was one of those albums I listened to a lot. But I noticed that after the fact because I was
Yeah.
listening to, there is, next year, I've already got idea for next year. I want us to go out of our way if we have to listen to them on YouTube. Is trying to find 10 new artists we've never listened to
Sure.
and try to make our favorite. There's so much new good stuff out there. I have a new friend. He's my boyfriend, I must admit, at the grocery store at Aldi, and we started talking about music, and he
Nice.
plays music, and he's got this wild freaking hair that
Uh-huh.
stands out like this, and he's always giving me a band when I walk through the door.
Yeah.
Go listen to them, and he's opened my eyes to some new groups kind of thing, and he listens to everything too. I think it's funny that it has to be with everybody else is that the influence from I got a lot of influence for outside, like my friend Ronnie, like my
Hmm.
mom, like my dad, all my music, my cousin Steve, influenced everything when I was listening to music. It was almost like here you listen to this, here you listen to this. I meant to say this on the whole show, on the main show, but Ronnie Lloyd and me, we actually did the top 10. Did I ever tell you this? We did Casey Kasem's top 10. We wrote it down every week, and then we did our top 10. We did that for almost 4 years.
Wow.
Every week we had it little notebooks
Yeah.
and did it. So it was one of those things where I find it ironic that a guy like Tom Petty is one of your favorite, and he was one of the biggest
Yeah.
dope smokers that there
Yep.
ever was, and
Yep. I know.
proponent. He was a
I know.
huge proponent for weed and getting it legalized and
Yeah.
everything. And then, of all the drugs that were in his system when he died, it's just so
Yeah.
weird. But his music just
Yeah.
it's weird because there's so much that was like the Beatles and everybody, so much music that is
Yeah.
me and you couldn't say, well, we want a straight edge. We're going to listen to straight edge music. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just the quality of the music and how it resonates with you. I mean, like I don't know why I just thought of Chris Benoit, but it's like, can you separate the crime from the appreciation of his career? So can I separate the drug use and the negatives about Tom Petty from the quality of the music? And I guess I can because
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
my
yeah.
favorite. So I just want to say, and wrapping this up, I just want to say, look at us. We went almost an hour and a half talking about music, and it was effortless. That's what brings people together, and that's what it. Even as wrestling guys, and that's what we normally do shows about together. The fact that we were able to go practically 90 minutes talking about music, and just it was so effortless
Well, it
to
was
do
so
it.
big, and yeah, and it was so big in my growing up. It hasn't been, and that's why I asked that question in the middle, is because it just slaps me in the face that I don't. And it's part of it is because you go back to the
Mhm.
same music over and over because it's familiar.
Yeah,
You know what you're going to hear, and you like the sound, you like the voice, and
yeah,
there's so many. What is the song? Losing Your Religion. So I'm
mhm.
watching the guy that did what Michael Stipe, is that his
Yeah.
name? Yeah.
REM.
So that's one of those songs hated growing up, absolutely love right now.
Yeah.
And I was listening to his reasoning for the song, and he said that song, and it just got me when he said this, that everyone has their own meaning for that song, and that's what that song's about. It's not what he wrote it about. It's what you think it is.
Yeah.
But it's funny what he wrote it about. That expression is a Southern expression, and his grandmother or his mother said it about somebody that they went to church with, that she was, acting floozy or whatever, and there she is, just losing her religion. That's how he got it. But that'd be a good top 10 songs that I like now. The B-52s and Love Shack and Rhythmics with what's the song about Rhythmics?
Sweet Dreams are made
Sweet
of this.
Dreams. I never liked that song. And absolutely love it now by them.
Yeah.
So I think it's because she was so odd looking. I hated her.
Annie Lennox, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
she's so odd looking. All right, see you later. Bye. I've got to eat. I'm starving.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you,
love
dude.
you, man.
Yep.
Bye. Wait.